Colorado, co-hosted by the Denver Zoo and the Center for Human-Carnivore Coexistence at Colorado State University. My name's Kevin Crooks, and I'm a professor in the Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Conservation Biology at CSU. I'm also director of our Center for Human-Carnivore Coexistence. Our mission is to develop approaches to minimize conflict and facilitate coexistence between people and predators, including wolves if they're restored to Colorado. So we're excited about our webinars over the next couple of weeks. Tonight, we'll hear from Dr. Doug Smith about wolves in Yellowstone and lessons learned for Colorado. And then next Wednesday evening, October 21st, same time, 5 p.m., we'll have a panel discussion on indigenous perspectives towards wolves. Before going further, I'd like to first read the land acknowledgement of Colorado State University. We acknowledge with respect that the land Colorado State University is on today is the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute nations and peoples. This was also a site of trade, gathering, and healing for numerous other native tribes. We recognize the indigenous peoples as original stewards of this land and all the relatives within it. As these words of acknowledgement are spoken and heard, the ties nations have to their traditional homelands are renewed and reaffirmed. Thank you. And with that, I'd now like to introduce our partner, Brian Acone, who's the Senior Vice President for Animal Care and Conservation at the Denver Zoo. Brian?
Thanks, Kevin. Welcome, everybody. We're excited to have you here. At Denver Zoo, our mission is inspiring communities to save wildlife for future generations. And we believe that inspiration comes from knowledge and experience. And so we are really excited to co-host this webinar with our partners at CSU, Center for Human-Carnivore Coexistence, about the lessons learned in Yellowstone and how those might apply here to Colorado and wolf reestablishment here. So a big thank you to CSU and especially to Dr. Doug Smith, our presenter today. And we hope that you enjoy the webinar.
Great, thanks, Brian. Yes, the partnership between CSU and Denver Zoo is a great one. I appreciate that. Well, now it's my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Stuart Breck, who will also introduce our guest speaker and help moderate the proceedings for tonight. Dr. Breck is a carnivore ecologist, and he's a research wildlife biologist at the USDA National Wildlife Research Center in Fort Collins. Stuart?
Well, thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Brian, and welcome to all of you to this seminar. I'm really excited to be here and to have Doug presenting tonight. A little bit of order of business before we get going. I want to encourage you as Doug is speaking tonight to write down questions that come to you in the chat box. We have we'll be monitoring that chat box and compiling those questions. And then we've asked Doug to go about 30-35 minutes and then be able to have some time to ask questions. So that'll occur after he's done with his presentation, and we will try to get to as many questions as possible. All right, so with that, I'd like to start the introduction. Before I kind of get into the formal introduction of Doug, I kind of want to give a little bit of personal perspective. So I've known Doug for a very long time. We were in graduate school together in the early 1990s at the University of Nevada, Reno. And this was before Doug was working on wolves in Yellowstone. And one of the things we definitely shared in common was a great love for running rivers. And that's really where our friendship began. And I love acknowledging that because you'll see how much passion Doug has for wolves. He's probably got an equal passion for running rivers, especially those up north in Canada. So the other thing about Doug that I'd like to mention is that in 1995, I had an opportunity to go up to Yellowstone and spend a month or two working on the project with him. And as part of that project, it was really a really incredible experience. But as part of that, one of his wolves packs moved out of the park onto a ranch. And so he sent me out to the ranch to live with the ranchers and to monitor this wolf pack. And that is probably had a pretty big influence of how I ended up in my career with the USDA. So, but with that, let me introduce Doug because you're here to hear from him. And a little bit about Doug's background. He got a a bachelor's from University of Idaho, a master's from Michigan Tech, and a PhD from University of Nevada, Reno. And then I believe it was 1994, he moved to Yellowstone and started working on the Yellowstone Wolf Project. And then in 1997, he became the lead biologist on that project, and has held that position ever since. He's also, in addition to running that project, I believe he runs 2 other projects in Yellowstone. One is the bird conservation project in Yellowstone, and I think the second is ungulate project in Yellowstone. So he's a very busy person. He's also very accomplished scientifically. He's published hundreds of papers on wolves in Yellowstone. He's written 4 books, and he's really considered one of the world premier wolf biologists. So it's a real distinct pleasure to have him with us tonight. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Doug Smith, and the title of his talk is Wolf Reintroduction in Colorado. What can we learn from Yellowstone? Doug, take it away.
Okay, thank you for that nice introduction. It's a great honor to be able to speak to this group, and note to self, never have a good friend introduce you ever again. So that was way too much information, but I think most of it was probably true. I do love wild rivers in northern Canada, but what I want to talk to you about tonight is a parallel love. Wolves and rivers in the north go together, and I think you or people are thinking about having them go together in one of their classic historical ranges in Colorado. So, wolves are a flashpoint for people. It's nice to think of them as just a part of the ecosystem and a part of nature, but that doesn't happen much anymore. They're very value-laden, emotional, political, but in a lot of ways they don't have to be that hard. In a lot of ways they're like other wildlife. So because it's very unnerving to sit and look at yourself in a camera, I'm going to try and flip to my slideshow so you don't have to look at me, or neither do I. So let's see if this works.
We got you, Doug.
You got it. Okay, so the screen sharing worked. So really my title is short, but shortness, simplicity is good, because this is the problems wolves have. They roamed across most of North America, and then were much reduced, and bringing them back when North America is mostly settled by people is a challenge. It's a big lift. And so the purpose of my talk is to kind of describe that process and what we've learned from Yellowstone. My slide didn't advance. So
By pushing the arrow buttons on your keyboard.
let's see how to advance it. I hit there. Okay. I don't know who did that, if that was me or Matt, but this is the historic range for wolves in North America, Mexico to the high Arctic. The eastern United States is a different species of wolf, the red wolf, although wolf taxonomy is Canis lupus supus is kind of a mess. So it might not be that distinct, but wolves essentially roamed over most of North America. And then by the 1950s, depicted here is the 1960s. The rectangle is the Yellowstone region, greater Yellowstone ecosystem. But by the 60s, it was the low point for wolf populations across North America. And the reason for that was extirpation, eradication by humans. So European humans. So essentially, when European humans settled North America and they moved west, they eliminated wolves. A lot of people viewed wolves the antithesis of civilization. Market hunting removed a lot of wolves' natural prey. Behind the loss of natural prey was livestock, primarily cattle, that brought on the cowboy, very much in the romance and folklore of Colorado. And one of their primary purposes was to protect that livestock and to kill wolves, with a 6-shooter with a 30-30, and there's nothing more romantic and more legendary than that story. So that culture is firmly embedded in Western history, and wolves are just not part of that. And so this is a picture. Stuart mentioned rivers in the far north. This is a picture from 1960. That was about the time of that last range map. This is the Northwest Territories. You can see in the lower part of the picture here, poison. That's a de Havilland beaver. So what they did in the far north, because it was so remote, is they flew over it and threw out poison baits to kill wolves. This is Yellowstone. I think the archives told me this was the 1930s. That's actually a coyote pelt, but you get the idea. There was good wildlife, there was bad wildlife, and wolves, predators, were part of the bad. And wolves arguably led the list of animals to get rid of as European people moved west, to make it safe for settlement. And so this was a value-laden view that all predators are bad. And so why do we have this perspective, this view? Very difficult to talk about, but we kind of have to own it. We kind of have to just be very direct and say, why don't we like wolves? And it's because they kill. And this is a photograph of wolves killing an elk calf that I took about a year ago. And we have to confront this. To bring back wolves, they are a predator. They kill for a living. Most life forms do in some form or another. Occasionally wolves kill inappropriate things, and that's the rub. And so how do we bring back this killer, so to speak, to Western landscapes, which are fully occupied by people, really? And so that's the challenge. And so I think that's, the future really is social science, as the Center for Human and Carnivore Coexistence has shown. You're on to the right track. And actually, we do know a lot about wolves. But people continue to be, I think, the important link. And so, this is demonstrated by actually one of our arguably greatest presidents. Theodore Roosevelt referred to wolves as the beast of waste and desolation. I actually met with his great-grandson in my office in Yellowstone, and I had to ask, would TR still feel that way today? Because he was such a lover of nature, big hunter, but big lover of nature. He actually identified golden eagles and peregrine falcons at Tower Falls in Yellowstone. I don't know many presidents who could do that. He did it. Great naturalist. And his great-grandson said, I don't think he'd say that today. I don't. His appreciation for nature, his love of nature, is that he would revise. And that's a very important thing for the ability to change our minds about things that we once held firmly. And so really that's the purpose of my talk today in the Yellowstone Wolf Project, is to uncover the truth about wolves through scientific discovery. Because if there's anything out there that gets, stories told about, fables told about, it's wolves. And misinformation is rampant. I cannot tell you how many people have told me, I ride these mountains year round and I know what they do. But hunches and subjectivity blend into everything humans do. So really finding objective truth about wolves is hard. But what I've learned is we've got to package it through stories, because people don't like numbers. They just don't. Our evolutionary history doesn't deal with numbers. We got to tell it in a story. And so that's one thing that we're trying to do. And I think you guys are trying to do in Colorado. A lot of your work, editorials, outreach has been that way. And I think that's been very effective. And so what's the problem? I have friends who study tigers in India who kill people, and they still call wolves more controversial than tigers. So a lot of this deals with perspectives. And plus, the United States, you can call a U.S. senator on your phone, or a congressperson. And, India, you can't do that. So wolves are very, very controversial in terms of wildlife species. I mean, orders of magnitude higher than everything else. So when you guys take on wolf recovery in Colorado, you're going into a big fight. And why is that? Well, because they compete directly with us. A lot of my colleagues through time have said that, wolves are so much like us and we compete with them directly. That's why we don't like them. And the big thing they want is space. I mean, this is not backyard wildlife. And I'll get to that a little bit in the talk, but that is the crux decision about having wolves. I mean, you can't have 5-6 packs and call it good. You need in excess of, probably 8 to 1,200 wolves in the Northern Rockies. And I realize it's in excess of what the special rules say, but they take a lot of space and humans occupy most of the space. And so that is a very key thing. They also will occasionally, rarely, but they do it, prey on livestock. Colleague Stuart Breck works on that, trying to minimize it. But then the prey they're supposed to eat is elk and deer. That's primarily what they eat in the Northern Rockies. And no one said they wouldn't. And of course, knowing what their impact is on prey populations is, in every case, a study. So each system is unique. And sometimes wolves and other carnivores together can be the issue. Other times it's another issue. And so knowing which one is difficult. And so that's very frustrating to people because we like kind of black and white answers. Human safety is overblown. Wolves do attack people. They very, very rarely kill someone. In the entire 20th century in Canada and Alaska, there was something like 20 non-rabid wolf attacks, no fatalities. There have been 2 fatalities since then. Most of them, but not all, and I have to move quickly because this is a long topic, deal with habituated wolves that were fed. And so there is a rhyme or reason. It's easy to understand. Rarely does a wolf on a first encounter with a human attack you. That's not true for bears and cougars. So wolves are, I think, the least dangerous North American carnivore. However, many people present that as an issue. And then the big one is how you grew up and how you think and how you feel and what your values are. Because some people feel nature's here for us to use as we please, and others feel that it's here, we're one creature among many and to coexist. And those are value systems that you have, that you got from your parents, your family, and your friends. And there's no amount of scientific information that's going to change that. And wolves are in the middle of it all. And so that's a tough one, a real tough one. And human nature, when confronted with controversy, is to dig in or change your mind. And I'm finding most of the time people dig in. So that's the crux one there, number 4. And as I mentioned, the space issue, Stuart mentioned in my intro that, I cherish deeply wild places, and wolves and wildness go hand in hand. And that, I think, is something we as a culture need to think about. And, you lose wolves, you lose a segment of wildness, and I think you lose a part of existence, and what is nature about? So wolves are highly symbolic of many things to themselves and to us. And when I mean to themselves, I mean intrinsic value. Is it right for us to completely wipe out another species? Is that okay? That's the question, and everybody's got a different answer. And so this whole thing you are onto. I think your effort in Colorado is focused on the right thing. It's about mindset, cultural norms, and human attitudes. We did not grow more wolf habitat in the Northern Rockies in the mid-1990s, but yet wolves are restored. There's roughly 2,000 wolves in Idaho, Montana, Wyoming right now. So how did that happen? We didn't increase more habitat. Well, people changed their minds. That's a big deal. I have no idea how cultural norms change, but that's where the work is necessary. And so the Great Yellowstone ecosystem was where we chose one of the first places to restore wolves. That brown and green is all public land, about 18 million acres, although there's different accountings of that, but it's roughly the size of the state of Connecticut. And it's arguably, I realize Colorado's up there too with public land, but this might be the most intact temperate zone ecosystem in the world. And so it was an obvious first choice because of that public land and because at the heart of it is Yellowstone and Grand Teton. And I think that's where other wolf projects have struggled, is you need a beachhead. You need a core area where there's no conflict, no problems. Nature preservation is what you're after. Mexican wolf is the first thing that comes to mind. Apache National Forest is not the same as Yellowstone or Grand Teton, and then surrounded by national forest. So that was key. That was key. But it wasn't just Yellowstone. As Colorado State has advanced, many people, scientists there, we had a metapopulation structure, which is mean multiple small populations that are connected through corridors and dispersal routes, connectivity. So if one population is doing poorly, it can be rescued by the others. So we had two other populations. Wolves were reintroduced to central Idaho, and then they were restored themselves through natural dispersal from Canada to northwest Montana. Now, central Idaho and Montana have blended together as one population, but Yellowstone has not. It's kind of like an island. Look at that brown and green, it's an island. And that's a factor. Connectivity is less. I don't have a lot of time to get into that, but it was a 3 metapopulation approach. Each population was supposed to have 10 breeding pairs. The states are managing for 15. Each state is well over that. And I don't think they're going to manage closely until they get much lower. But many people, and I don't have time to get into this, have contested that 10, 10, and 10 is too low. But that's another argument. But a key thing, we're a couple weeks from an election. A key thing for all of this, and again, this is social science, is that it was both groups or both mindsets. The nature is coexistence, and the nature's here for us to be used, got together and were able to reach compromise. And this was key. I could go through the contributions of each one of these politicians, don't have time for that. But the issue is it was through many administrations, through a lot of time on both sides of the aisle. And that is just so important. And so not everybody gets what they want. You got to work it out. So very famous photos, the first wolf coming in, that's the Secretary of the Interior in blue, Director of Fish and Wildlife Service in brown, and very symbolic first wolf. And Yellowstone, everything in Yellowstone's a big deal. Throw wolves in is just, kryptonite, out of sight, huge deal. So that's the first wolf going into Crystal Creek Pen. And so the population did quite well, but this is kind of split up into 2 phases. This first about 12-year period, the population was up and down. This is mostly explained by disease. We hit our high water mark here at 174 wolves in 16 packs. Each time the population declined due to disease, it immediately bounced back. Then it declined again due to disease. The disease was distemper. And then the third decline, it didn't bounce back. I kind of just eyeball this and call this phase 1 and this phase 2. We're still in this. This is about 100 wolves park-wide. This is split up by the northern part of the park, which is only 10% of the park, but early on held most of the wolves because it had a very large elk herd. And then these last few years, the interior part of the park, which is the rest 90% of the park, which is a high elevation plateau with a lot of snow and doesn't support the ungulate population. And so it's stabilized. And the big ecological question is, how long is this going to last? About 100 wolves, 10 packs. And we still do have disease outbreaks that occur, but nothing like these disease outbreaks when we had a very high population. And so this, wolves have pretty much occupied the whole park, mostly in the north. There's 2 new packs down here, but these packs have trouble in the winter. The circles mean no radio collars. And this is last year. We're working on, this pack is gone. This pack doesn't have collars now, but we had 2 packs creep in down here, but this is because there's not year-round prey, essentially high country. And that'll be an issue for Colorado. So the wolves leave in the winter, mostly go south and east, following the migrating ungulate herds. That'll be a big issue for Colorado. And this, I don't ask you to pay attention to, poor public speaking to put it in, but really proud of the graph. But this is wolfpack territories for 25 years. And it's in a book, I'll mention that. Our book's coming out next month. I encourage you to study this, but it really shows that the wolves settle where the prey is and that pack territories overlap when you have high density, and that overlap leads to mortality, which can be a wolf population check. And so I don't know how much of a factor that will be for Colorado. And so this is, I don't have time to get into this, but this is kind of the population dynamics of wolves in one graph. This is, the purple shows their survival rate 1 year to the next. The black dots are how many wolves are collared. That's what we're basing these data on. But you can see that wolves don't have tremendously high survival rates, about 70 to 80%. The red is the ones that died. The turquoise is dispersed, and then the gray is lost. And wolves are incredibly hard to keep track of because dispersal distance of 300 to 500 miles is not a big deal. They just get up and go. I mean, Yellowstone wolves have made it to Colorado. They haven't survived, but if someone down there didn't tell us they're there, we'd lose them. And that's that. So this looks like it's slightly less than 70 to 80% survival, but that includes dispersed and missing. So a wolf's average lifespan is only about 5 or 6. They can live to 12 or 13. That's fairly rare, but they have a compressed life history, not like a bear or a cougar that can live to 15, 20. So wolves have evolved to die at a high rate, reproduce at a high rate, live short lives, have high productivity. So totally different strategy than the other large carnivores. Now the big issue, I'll try to explain this quickly, a few rugged slides here coming up, but obviously in some ways the preying on elk and deer is a bigger issue than livestock. I mean, livestock's black and white. Wolves kill livestock, they're dead. When they kill elk and deer, that's what they're supposed to eat. And so this is the northern Yellowstone elk herd, a very famous elk herd in North America. When I forgot to mention, but Yellowstone established 1872. They started killing carnivores immediately. All the wolves and cougars were wiped out by the 20s and 30s. Bears are preserved, but a lower population size. Immediately, they had to start controlling the elk herd because of overpopulation, because of range damage. And they killed roughly 77,000 elk from 1923 to 1968. So you're getting the tail end of that artificial control period. The Park Service stopped killing right about here. Elk population grew in the absence of natural predation. Wolves were reintroduced here. Poor timing, all-time high. When you're at an all-time high, you're going to go down just because you're at an all-time high. We didn't count elk these 2 years. This was not a government cover-up, but people are still saying that it was. But the herd declined, and that's a big issue. And so this is a tough one for the National Park Service. How can this be better than that? Or less is more? That's a tough one to explain to Americans, but this is probably a more ecologically appropriate elk population than this. This was probably overpopulation. Now, a lot of hunters on the edge of the park liked this because elk pretty much summer in Yellowstone, winter outside of it. That's not entirely true, but that's a generality that I'll use for now. And they're coming out during the hunting season. And so impacts on hunters has been a big issue. But there's been a slight uptick in our last few aerial surveys. By the way, these are elk counted, not siteability corrected, and it's known elk are missed. Oops. Okay, next. I'm going to go through these quickly, but the next 3 slides are to show you the selectivity. Wolves do not prey randomly on elk, as many people say. And from what I understand, the elk and deer herd in Colorado is one of the biggest of all Western states. There's probably a lot of vulnerable animals. I don't think you're going to see wolves make a dent on them for a long time, years, maybe not ever, if wolf populations are held below saturation levels. But this is condition of elk killed by wolves as measured by bone marrow. The browns early winter, they're mostly in good shape, although there are some years where elk go into winter in poor shape. And that's probably due to drought conditions impacting forage. But in late winter, they're all in poor shape. And so this is what wolves focus on. And you can see how this is reflected in rate of killing. Oops, I gotta go back. But the red lines are wolves, the number of elk killed per wolf per day in early winter, and the blue is late. And the blue is almost always higher than the red, which indicates the selectivity of wolves. In other words, they need an animal that's got a problem for them to be able to kill it. In general, that doesn't mean they don't kill healthy animals, but in general, that's what they're making their living on. And so right now, Colorado's with its huge elk herd, I'm going to think wolves are going to do very well for the first decade or two. This is a very tough graphic to explain, but I'll do it quickly. This is the age distribution of elk that we've caught via helicopter and released with radar collars. So skewed towards young animals, but this is the elk that wolves kill. They're gray bars. So they're really focusing on this older segment of the herd. So if you're an elk, this is the survival probability, annual survival probability that you have this pink line. You know, right here is about the age of a prime age elk, 12, 13. You pretty much are invulnerable to wolf predation up to here, and then your chance of surviving goes down. But the black line's your pregnancy rate. So these wolves are killing the least productive elk in the herd. In fact, these elk in here are resorting to alternate year reproduction because it's super hard to have an elk calf, nurse it all summer, maybe into the fall, and then restore your condition to an adequate level, usually about above 12% body fat, but taking care of that calf all winter. If it's poor forage and you're old, you're not going to be able to get to that 12% body fat point. It could be, you know, they go up to 20% body fat, but you need that certain minimum. If you don't get to that minimum, you don't get pregnant. And so they start flipping, have a calf every other year. And these gray bars, these are the elk that wolves are, and this is only cows, their bulls aren't here. These are the elk that they're looking at. And then of course, I don't know if Colorado's black bears, not grizzly bears, but you have grizzly bears, you have cougars. So Yellowstone is a rich carnivore community, arguably the richest it's been in history. This is something to celebrate. A lot of people don't, but we have 5 carnivores: wolves, black bears, grizzly bears, cougars, coyotes, and humans, 6, sorry. And that's huge predation pressure. And so oftentimes when you look at Colorado, it won't be, are there just wolves? But are there wolves and cougars? Are there wolves, cougars, and black bears? Are there wolves, cougars, black bears, and humans? That's where you get into some of these predator-caused declines. Usually just one predator won't do it. Yellowstone's got all 6, but then that elk population has stabilized. So as I said, numbers don't do it. People need a story. So this is something we've had to deal with in Yellowstone. I mean, my first 20 years here, I really felt that data and evidence would carry the day. No. You've got to somehow reach the hearts of people. Maybe not even the minds, just their hearts. But the other thing is, it's a human-dominated world. I mean, how many times when you hear the expression, I'm just trying to feed my family, that will win the day. So that means the best place for wolf recovery is where there's low conflict. In general, that means high degree amount of public land. So humans and wolves aren't overlapping. Wolves can easily live with humans. Humans have a harder time living with wolves, but that's very important. So I already talked about this. How we view the world is largely our influences outside of our objective, practical, learned life. And so the issue is our story true? And that's hard. And that's what science tries to do. And it's our best way of knowing. But, you know, that's not the best way of knowing for the rest of the world. Other people have different belief systems that they rely on. And so for wolves, the story is really true. And that's a huge, huge issue. And I think that's what the Denver Zoo and the Center for Human-Carnivore Coexistence is really trying to do, is get the truth out there. And then let's have a debate based on the facts. Super hard to do. And you guys are, you know, writing into media outlets a lot, just trying to get the right facts out there. And that's wonderful. So how do you do, though, when you get the facts out there and it's still going badly? You know, you got to listen. People tend to like to just have the floor, have the podium, have the mic, whatever you got, you know, just hear what the other side's trying to say. And also science has got a problem with, you know, there's big disagreements over what have been the impacts of wolves on the Yellowstone ecosystem. A lot of this work comes out of Colorado State, and a lot of the answers come about because of the questions you ask and the studies you design. So your methodology will spit out different answers in someone else's methodology, but you're trying to understand the system the same way. Sort that out. Don't confuse the public. The public doesn't understand confidence intervals and variability either. So you've got to simplify. I know I've just riled up a lot of people by saying that, but you've got to have a very coherent message. And then people compete with each other for recognition. Try and put that aside. You know, the whole thing about egos and all that kind of stuff. You know, let other people speak. Explain the data as best you can. Say when you don't know. And, you know, humans evolved to be selfish. We want to win. So like I said earlier, we dig in or we change our minds. Most of the time we dig in. And, you know, think about that if you see yourself doing it. I try not to dig in on wolves, although I fervently believe in wolf recovery. So, you know, you're bucking human nature on all these things. A tough thing to overcome. But, you know, people, I mean, I cannot tell you how important wolves have been to Yellowstone. It is wildness restored. And, you know, 25 years ago, if you asked me what the main reason, this is an aerial shot I took flying an airplane. There's wolves out over here, out off camera. I mean, it's a sensation. I mean, we crave stuff real nowadays. We live in parking lots and plazas everywhere. Wolves are real nature, right there. And people can't get enough of it. And so 25 years ago, I said the best reason to reintroduce wolves was ecological and ethical. You know, intrinsic value, all nature, restore it. I don't know, man. The thing that has benefited the most are people. I mean, look at that. People cannot get enough of wolves in Yellowstone. It won't go away. It's bringing nature back and deep within. We want that and need it. Very important to restoration. Very important. Overwhelming national support. You know, this is the classic debate: urban, rural, local, far away. You know, you don't have to live with them. I do. That's going to be a tension point forever. That's where compromise comes in. And where compromise comes in, this is an outfitter camp. I just rode in a couple weeks ago to another outfitter camp. This is something I've tried to do the last 20 or so years in Yellowstone. I grew up riding horseback. I naturally like it. Sometimes my bosses don't. They just think I'm riding the mountains to have fun. No, you go to the other folks. They don't have to come to you. You go to them and you talk. Although letting them talk is maybe better. Listening, telling stories, listening to their methodology. I ride these mountains for a living. I know what these wolves do. Really? Tell me about it. I want to hear. I hunt elk. Elk do different things in the presence of wolves. Really? Tell me about it. I want to hear about it. Then I might slip in if there's an opportunity. We radio collar them, follow them around. That's a different way of knowing than your way. Let's swap notes. Let's swap notes. Very effective. And I hate to say it too, because I'm a little bit of an idealist, although I am a hunter. I am not a wolf hunter. I hunt elk and deer every year. It's probably going to be hard to have wolves without hunting wolves. They will cause problems, and so killing them when they cause problems will reduce opposition, but also hunting them when they're not causing problems increases social tolerance. Big subject. We could talk about it more. I'm sure your folks in the Center for Human-Carnivore Coexistence study this. So this is the number of wolves shot in Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, around Yellowstone. I don't have time to do a deep dive on it, but that northern border is not as wildernessy as the eastern and western and southern borders. So that's why more wolves are shot there. But we're doing a study. This is taking a lot of time and effort, but a group from Grand Teton, Yellowstone, Denali National Park, Alaska, Yukon-Charlie National Park, Alaska, or National Preserve, and Voyageurs in Minnesota, we're all working together to understand what the impacts of wolf hunting outside of parks are on wolves living in. And wolves can sustain a harvest, as I just said, but their social dynamics are probably the most fragile, and that's underappreciated. Don't have time to get into that. So, but the big issue everywhere, even Canada and Alaska, which is theoretically remote, is how many wolves will people tolerate? And that's why livestock control and hunting comes into play. And then there's this tension. We can all get along, but preservation is no use, conservation is wise use, and that clashes. and national parks are about no use, and state game management is about wise use. So you got to work that out. And so that's a toughie. And so, of course, the stories are rampant. Famous wildlife biologist from Alberta writes articles like this. And then you have Facebook posts like this. So it's attitudes, it's discussion, it's changing people's minds. And you guys are on to that. So what have we learned in Yellowstone? Well, Yellowstone's a big deal. Colorado could be a big deal too. Long-term research is our main goal because, 80% of wildlife studies are 3 to 5 years. A long-term study of 20 years plus really gets to the soft underbelly of nature and what's going on, and that's key. And really, in some ways, people talk about umbrella species, et cetera, but wolves are a vehicle to preserve nature or wildness, key. So 25 years of Yellowstone wolves. Elk weren't wiped out. Many people said they were. We have a smaller herd. That's probably a good thing. Hard message. It's a natural predator-prey system. We don't have that many places. There's trophic cascade that Colorado State has done a lot of research on. That's indirect effects and kind of reshaping ecosystem dynamics. Yellowstone's been a big area for study for that. And Yellowstone, even though it's the first national park in the world, 1872, it immediately had predator control and it immediately had the fur trade and elimination of, fires and control of elk. All kinds of different things. Yellowstone's probably as good as it's ever been. And we've had deep dives on wolves. Watching them has been one of our major ways of learning about them. And, for humans, they have not been a threat. It's a great human connection to nature. And that's been a big economic boon to Yellowstone, $35 million per year. It's been a big deal. And how do you blow that up? You got to make something out of it. Because it's about wolves, it's about humans, it's about nature. All of those things are important. Next month, we worked 6 years on this book. This book's to summarize the first 25 out next month. When I didn't say in the talk, hopefully is there. Anyways, thank you for the great honor to speak in the next wolf potentially area. It won't be easy, but it's a worthy effort. Thank you.
Well, Doug, I don't know if you can hear everybody clapping, but I'm sure people are very appreciative of your talk. I know I enjoyed listening to this. So, but I want to jump right into some questions. We've got about, maybe 10, 15 minutes. And I think there's a real interesting question from someone in the audience, and it is, let me find it. The question is, what would be the greatest benefit of reintroducing wolves to Colorado? And if you can address that, and then also maybe tie in, we know the ecological impacts in Yellowstone. Do you think we'd see similar impacts in Colorado?
Yeah, I think that I'm worried about the future of nature wildness, and wolves are so hard to live with that if you can have wolves restored to any ecosystem, it's a form of saying stop. We're going to allow other life forms to exist, even life forms that are hard to live with. And that's symbolic, and a lot of people say, so what? We don't need them. Life is fine without them. But I just encourage people to think about, what that means. What would it be like not to have those Colorado vistas, high peaks, country that, without the big carnivores, it just feels flat. It almost feels like nothing. And, wolves and grizzlies and cougars and things like that tend to, Wolverine, lynx, other critters, they tend to make it wild. And I realize that's getting to be a bit beyond the conversation. But then the other point is do we have a right to just wipe out everything, even though they're hard to live with? In terms of ecosystem recovery, the strong ecological changes we've seen in Yellowstone is due to a saturated carnivore community. And so just the mere presence of wolves and typically other carnivores isn't enough to bring about these top-down effects that we've seen. You can kind of bottom up, and that's sun flowing through plants and up through ungulates into the carnivores. or you can have top-down, which is carnivores preying on ungulates, which prey on plants, and that's kind of a yin-yang. And you really don't get those strong top-down effects until you reach the carrying capacity for the large carnivores. So just having wolves back won't necessarily mean the changes that we saw in Yellowstone. And my guess is, wolf density changes by several orders of magnitude when you hit the Yellowstone boundary, because as soon as you leave the park, wolf numbers are controlled by people. And inside the park, wolf numbers are controlled by prey, the amount of available food. And so, I don't know, the public land matrix in Colorado that well to know if that dynamic will be the same. But I wouldn't go out expecting similar impacts that were found in Yellowstone.
Okay, good. Another, I think, great question here, and it gets to the social tolerance that you discussed quite a bit. The question is, does hunting wolves increase tolerance? And what changes in attitudes, if any, have you experienced in Yellowstone after the start of a legal wolf hunt? So I think that's a great question. Maybe dig into that a little bit more. I might follow up with another question after the answer.
The science on that question is mixed. So there's some scientific papers published that believe that whether wolves are hunted or not has no impact on social tolerance, whereas others disagree. There's kind of two factions on that. However, a lot of state game managers who haven't published their findings overwhelmingly indicate that hunting increases social tolerance. And that is a very important tool to having wolves in the landscape. In fact, a lot of wildlife biologists in the Northern Rockies discussed that early on, there was a majority of people who were in favor of wolf recovery in Idaho, Montana, Wyoming. And because they hit their biological goal in 2002, but wolves weren't delisted on the first time until 2009, and then relisted and then delisted a couple different times. And it all didn't really take place until the 2012 and past, that long period of time where wolves were not hunted and repeatedly litigated caused social tolerance to go down. And so a lot of that's unpublished as well. So there is a lot of work that can be done in that arena. But I think given the scientific disagreement, published papers, that it's not determined, but state game managers feel hunting is a key aspect of having wolves back.
Well, along those lines of I don't know if it's social tolerance, but well, when I was visiting you in Yellowstone a long time ago, I got to see a couple of the public meetings about wolf restoration in Yellowstone, and they were hostile. There were people yelling and screaming at each other, demonstrating, threatening to pull weapons and things of this. It was just eye-opening for me. And I know you've experienced a lot of that, and maybe firsthand, but also observed it from a distance. I'm just wondering, is there a way for Coloradoans, if we decide to restore wolves, is there a way to minimize that kind of hostility and get to a place of compromise in a better way? I wonder if you have any thoughts to share on that.
Well, I don't know. That's a real tough one. One thing I did learn early on, and maybe as a government employee, I shouldn't say this, but one thing that, people just by human nature don't like the government. No one likes anybody telling you what to do, whether it's, county government, city government, state government, especially federal government. And, I'm federal government. Nobody likes to be told what to do. Leave me alone. Don't regulate me. And so the other thing they don't like is the government never saying anything, never taking a stand. And so I think one useful tool is when you go into those hostile environments, try and be a normal person that always tells the truth. And I know that sounds basic and easy, but it's really hard for people to do. And let the attacks come. Say you don't know when you don't know. Beyond, yeah, I know how many, we estimate wolves kill, 16 to 22 elk per year. That's what everybody wants to know. Then they immediately multiply that by the number of wolves, and you have a a fire raging in the room, but at least say it. You know, give them the data. You know, a lot of science is estimation. A lot of people don't get that. They take your estimate and make it a hardcore answer. But defy the stereotype. Defy the stereotype. Come in, tell folks what you know, tell the truth. You know, maybe put bounds on it. Try and be a real person. Don't be a government bureaucrat. But one thing I found is walk into a room of wolf haters and throw the red meat on the floor and go, let's talk about it, man. Let's talk about it. And, you know, you do get the moments that aren't so good, but you just have to be a real person looking people straight in the eye and going from there, because they think you're going to not do that. As a government official, immediately the assumption is you got something to hide, or you're not going to tell me the full truth because this is a government cover-up. And that's just the mythology about government people. And you should almost take pleasure in defying that. No, man, I'm going to tell you the good side and I'm going to tell you the bad side, and then let's talk.
Good advice. I want to jump back maybe into some wolf biology. We have several questions here that relate to disease from the audience. And so I'll just read a couple of these. Was there a vaccination campaign for reintroduced wolves in Yellowstone for distemper or other diseases? And kind of a follow-up question, did dogs possibly transmit distemper to wolves?
So I'll take the second one first. No, they didn't. The distemper hits the entire carnivore community. We looked at veterinary records around Yellowstone when we had the outbreaks, and there were very few dog records with distemper. There were some, but we viewed that as not the agent. And then two, yes, all the wolves we caught in Canada, I neglected to say, I'm sorry for that. We got 41 wolves, 14 from Alberta first year, 17 from British Columbia second year, and actually 10 from Northwest Montana third year. They were all vaccinated. Now we don't vaccinate them because we want nature to take its course. Although mange is an introduced disease to the area, but you can't vaccinate against it. Once you see it, it's too late. But you know, now we definitely, the goal of U.S. National Park Service is to let nature take its course. If it's human caused, we'll intervene. If it's natural, we won't. But you know, we had a huge investment bringing the wolves in, and we didn't want them to die. You know, we wanted to maximize our chances for success. So yes, all the wolves handled, and all 41 were handled coming in, were vaccinated, a full spectrum of diseases, because we wanted to have them live.
Yeah. I think we have time for definitely one more question, maybe another one, depending on how you answer this question. But let's see. The question from the audience is there a possibility that a viable population of wolves could arise in Colorado through natural migration from Yellowstone?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, they've made it there already a couple times. The issue is, will they survive? Because I think I read an article not too long ago that the pack at Northwest Colorado is getting picked off. I forget the source, but we've had a couple wolves go there from Yellowstone before, and they die too. So if wolves trickle in due to this age-old problem of human animosity, they'll probably get picked off. Is Colorado well within the dispersal range of wolves from Wyoming? Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, they get up and go. But will they make it one wolf at a time or one pack at a time? It's a guess, but I'm going to guess no. So I think that's where you guys arrived at reintroduction, which is essentially what we did, is to overwhelm the human mortality. Now, we also had Yellowstone, which, we haven't had, we've had some poaching in Yellowstone, or one documented, but by and large, it's non-existent. And that helps jumpstart the population. I don't think you've got that. I don't think Rocky Mountain can carry that for Colorado.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do one more question. And this one is basically kind of a question getting back to the social end of it. What do you think is more important, spending time advocating for habitat preservation, or is it public education? And I kind of reframe that a little bit in terms of your point about how do we get the message across to the public, and what are the effective tools? And you've mentioned some already, but maybe let's end on that note.
Well, I mean, I think, I spoke of winning the hearts of people, not the minds, and maybe that, in the heat of battle, giving a talk that wasn't well said. I mean, I think you do need to win the hearts and minds of people. And if you do that, then the habitat preservation falls into place. If you've educated the public to what's at stake, to what we're losing, to what wolves mean, and that this doesn't have to be hard. Wolves actually are, they're not a wilderness species. 30 years ago, people thought they were. That's just the only place wolves survived was wilderness, but they're not a wilderness species. And, with management, and that's the tough part because people tend to disagree on management, but management does involve some killing and admitting that some places wolves shouldn't be, but then vigorously protecting places where they can be. That's all an up here thing, a human thing. And the preserving of the habitat is a next step once you've done that. And so, so much of this is about human personalities. And right now, human personalities are making everybody angry, but we got a lot at stake. I think we've got nature, wildness, ecosystems, selfishly human, pleasure and quality of life at stake. And wolves don't have to be the polarizing fact to all of that.
All right, I think that's a good way to end. And let me encourage everybody on this Zoom call to please fill out a survey that'll be coming your way, I believe by tomorrow. And this is part of a program at the Conservation Psychology Lab at Colorado State University is evaluating these programs and how they affect people. So important survey, please fill that out. I'd also like to thank the Denver Zoo, the Center for Human-Carnivore Coexistence for putting on this presentation and sponsoring Doug. And then of course you, Doug, it's nice to see you, even though we're hundreds of miles away. Nice to see you again. And thank you for all your time and effort with this. So with that, I'd like to sign off. Thank you.